Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So today I welcome Joe Ghosheh to the show. What's going on there, Joe?
What's happening, brother? How's it going, everybody?
Good. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year to you there, Joe. Glad you're on the show. Joe, for those that don't know Joe, he is a true coral connoisseur hailing from South Carolina. He and his fiancé own Carolina Coral Heads, a business that emphasizes sustainability and specializes in aquaculturing rare corals. And we're going to look at a couple of sweet choice pieces there. Right, Joe? But before we start chatting with Joe, I want to thank the sponsors of the show, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate these companies supporting the live stream. And I appreciate all you folks out there tuning in. I see we got a bunch of familiar folks in the chat. Please don't forget to hit that like button. Smash it so more people can find this live stream. And as always, drop your comments and questions in the chat. We'll love to make this interactive. And I will try to get to all those questions. So, Joe, man, how did you get into this great hobby of ours, reef keeping? What was your journey to where you're at today?
Well, my family's always had freshwater tanks, nothing marine related. Actually, I've always wanted, even from a young age, a marine tank, but for years and years and years, if I would ask anybody about it or doing it, they would immediately deter me. They'd be like, that's too much. That's the whole nother animal. You don't want anything to do with that. So for a long time, I just stayed away for that reason, because people told me that it wasn't easy. So
they were scaring you off.
What?
They were scaring you off.
Yes, that's exactly what they're doing, which is, I want to do the opposite to people. It's not as hard as you think, you know what I mean? So after a while, I was just like, well, I'll see how hard it is for myself. And eventually, about 8 years ago, I gave it a shot, and I have not looked back. But like a lot of people's journey, I started liking fish. I was in it for the fish. I didn't know anything about coral. I loved angelfish. I loved tangs. I loved all those things. But eventually, once you go to your LFS enough, you start to notice there's another side to the reefing journey. There's coral, and once I think I started in Zoas.
Yeah.
Like do the softies, the easy stuff, and once I got a taste for it, there was no looking back.
No stopping you.
I mean, it's like a lot of things, and it is an addiction. That's for sure.
Yes, it is, my friend. It is an addiction. Yes. See a whole bunch
Better
of
than a lot of other addictions. So yeah.
but it's a healthy addiction. Let's put it that way. Not necessarily on the wallet though.
Well,
it can be. It can be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like many hobbyists, I started out a hobbyist. I mean, I wasn't in it to make money right off the jump. It just kind of happened like that, and you slowly subsidize what you're doing, and then it works out sometimes. But I think if you do it right, you can kind of at least pay for what you're doing. You know.
Right. Is that kind of how it started with you in the business? You were just kind of a pretty intense hobbyist, and then you turned into a business.
Absolutely. I'm a collector at heart, and I still am. I got in, and once I started seeing some of those prettier colored, rare corals, you get that bug. I don't know. It really did something to me, and I for a long time I was just a collector, an avid collector. I enjoyed just getting the prettiest pieces I could get my hands on, honestly.
So Chris Carney says reef keeping it's a lifestyle, and
exactly.
I agree.
Exactly. It absolutely. That's why the business is Carolina Coral Heads, because that's all that's on my brain usually is coral. So it's a life.
I see both Chris and Amanda Meckley in the chat. Greg Carroll, Great Beard of Reef. What's happening, everybody? Happy New Year, everybody.
What's happening, Chris? How y'all doing?
That's how I got to you, Joe. Was Mr. Chris Meckley? He's like, all right, I'm gonna send you a couple pictures of this guy's systems. You got to check him out. You got to have him on your show. I saw I think it was Instagram or something like that, and I was like, oh, mackerel.
He's a great guy. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's an asset to this industry. Absolutely. And I appreciate him putting my name out there, honestly.
Chris is the best. Rich Colombo, what's happening there, Rich? So was there anybody in particular when you kind of made that decision to get into reef keeping that was a big influence on you, or did you just kind of like go to the local fish store a lot and just really learn from that local fish store or fish stores?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to have 3 LFSs within like 10 miles of my home, so that's a luxury. That's absolute luxury. Palmetto Reef, fishy business, and aquarium specialty. So I was able to really go into those shops, especially in the beginning. Palmetto Reef really influenced a lot of what I did, and Will Garnett kind of got me jump started into coral. He kind of like, look, there's this whole other side of this marine life that I credit him absolutely for jumping me into it.
So how long have you been keeping reef tanks?
I was thinking about this question earlier because I figured it would get asked. We're about 8 years.
8 years. All right. So I'm going to show this. You passed along a short video clip here, Joe, of one of your systems.
Yeah.
This is a top-down shot, and obviously it is packed with SPS, and that is your specialty, correct?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Trying to dive into a little more, just to have more variety, but specialty and my favorite SPS, absolutely.
And how big was that tank we were just looking at there, from the top-down shot?
That's the Waterbox 220.
That's the one behind you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And how many systems, how many tanks do you have in your in your house, right? I mean, you're doing this out of your house.
Yes, Jason Fox Keith model for sure.
Yeah. Basement reefer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at this point, they're in every room of our home, I think.
Every room.
You know how it goes. I believe total we've got eight running tanks and 2 dedicated quarantines because I believe that that's very important.
So 8 tanks. How many different systems between the 8 tanks plus the 2 quarantines? How many different systems do you have?
So it'd be this display, and then I have a frag tank off of this display. Then I have the 2 quarantines and 4 frag tanks. 1 dedicated LPS tank, and then 3 mix of everything, mostly SPS.
And those are their own systems?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
Yes,
that's a lot of work, dude. That's a lot of work, you know?
Woo, you're telling me, bro. I hear people say, oh, man, you got it easy. Woo, buddy, you're further from the truth. This I was actually talking to Meckley earlier. I don't know if, we're not in it for the money, but I don't know if we make enough for what we do. It's just a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, no, it is. So your primary customers is the primary business online? Is that pretty much what you guys are, the clientele you're selling to is retail online?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We're lucky enough to have a really good following with Instagram and Facebook, and we do majority of sales through direct messages. We do some online business. I encourage people to reach out anytime they have any questions or anything. But yeah, so most of it is online.
So, all right, we're getting some questions here about your systems and all that stuff, and I definitely want to dive into. You got some reef breeders right behind you. I can see that.
Yes.
Let me see here. Let's take another look at some of these pictures though that you sent me. You sent me a bunch of pictures, and let's talk about coral first there, Joe, and then we'll kind of get behind the scenes in terms of how you keep this stuff. So this first picture you sent me is kind of like a group shot. It looks like I see a looks like almost like a sunset millie in the back, maybe some sort of bonsai coral. There's a lot to take in here, man. There's a lot of colors.
That's the frag tank coming off the main.
That's the frag tank up. Those are some big freaking frags, dude.
So they've been sitting for a little while. We're actually got more systems in the works because we're, like every reefer, we're running out of real estate. You know what I mean? So trying to keep up with everything.
Wow, this is a pretty big statement. Kyle Henneke, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Joseph Ghosheh is one of the best aquaculture SPS sellers in the country and an even better human being. Love you, Joseph.
Yeah. Appreciate that, honestly. I don't know about all that, but I appreciate that.
So how can they find you guys on social media? Is it Carolina Coral Heads?
Yes, sir. Carolina Coral Heads on Instagram, and we run a Facebook group, Coral Heads. And our website, you can always go on there. We have a phone number on there. You ever have any questions? I think our email's on there. You just shoot us a message. Anything you want to know.
All right. Here's another sick top down. I guess of the water box that you're sitting in front of, right there. And wow, that. So what are you doing, man, when you've got such overgrowth like that? I do find that to be difficult in terms of kind of like that. Little potential warfare going on there, and you get some corals, don't get as much flow to certain corals as you would like. How often are you going in and trimming this stuff?
So we try to trim pretty often because that's maintenance. That's part of maintenance. I was looking earlier, and I'm pretty confident most of these colonies are touching each other. And for a long time, I was a little freaked out. I was like, something's, this is going to completely cause a chemical reaction. It's just not going to go good. Knock on wood, it seems to just, when they touch, it seems to kill the acro that's least dominant.
Yeah.
And then kind of just rolls like that. Knock on wood. So hopefully that continues to be the trend, but that's what we've seen so far, because I thought they'd be killing each other, but they've seemed to live in harmony for the most part.
So how long has that tank been running, or at least, in terms of that iteration of it?
This tank has been up for 4.5, 5 years.
4.5, 5 years. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and bare bottom, looks like?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Actually, my first bare bottom, and it was, it's not a lie. It definitely takes longer to establish. The sand definitely helps. Sand has its drawbacks, obviously, but it definitely took longer to establish. I'll say that.
How much rock do you have in the tank?
Oh, I didn't weigh, but I don't know if you can tell. It's you know, it's rock from bottom to 80% up.
Yeah.
Probably a solid 200-pound rock.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that's a good point. I believe in having as much rock as you can put into a system.
Interesting.
Just for, I mean, that's my.
Which is kind of like the opposite of what a lot of where a lot of folks are trending to, which is like minimal aquascaping, bonsai aquascaping. That's not for you, huh?
That'll never be me, my friend. The opposite. I want as much area for beneficial bacteria to do their thing on as they can have.
Yeah, I did in one of my systems, one of my my tanks, that I did a very minimal aquascape. I think it's maybe 120 pounds of rock, the Carib Sea Life Rock in my 187-gallon display tank. But I have a cryptic sump plumbed into it. And so in that cryptic sump, I have over 100 pounds of Haitian live rock in that thing. So that's kind of like one of the ways I was able to kind of get around the issues. Yeah. So there's a lot of places for bacteria to colonize with with that cryptic sump, and it's pretty cool. I'm surprised not more people do that.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably more or less just a real estate having the room.
Yeah.
But I agree. If you do have the room, that's a great option.
Well, guys like us have the room because our houses are a place of work. So.
No houses are great. Exactly.
So you've got tanks all over the house there, huh?
Yes, sir.
And your fiance is cool with that in terms of.
He's the other half of the business, so we're doing the Chris Meckley, Amanda Meckley method. We're husband and wife trying to do this. So we butt heads like anybody does. On I try to push the limits a lot, but
Well,
that's how it goes.
I commend you. I don't think I could ever do that with my wife. I love my wife, but I don't think we would. That it would be good in terms of us working that closely together. I think, but hey, everybody is different.
It was a learning curve, like anything. It was a learning curve, but we're kind of getting in a groove now. So that's.
So are you guys thinking about moving into a bigger house since you're running out of space? Is that what's going on there?
Well, given the financial world and the way everything is, not anytime soon. So,
dude, the amount of corals you got there, I think you could, be pretty well off there in due time.
Well, we are lucky enough to have a detached garage that's unfinished. So I think that's the next move.
That's where this stuff's going to push out to. Okay, gotcha. Here I got another picture of a frag rack, and looks like a whole bunch of Montipora underneath that frag rack. Is that what? Yeah.
I think that was my first reef tank, the 65.
Oh, that's your first reef tank. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that the one with the clam on the right side?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was your first reef tank, huh?
My first reef tank, man. I devoted myself to reefing. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, geez, dude, that's like everything is. There's not one piece of space of real estate that's not taken up by coral.
She was second, so it was after she got full. I was like, well, and I think that's every reefer. Once you're successful enough, that's the problem. You run out of real estate. You gotta get more. It's part of the problem.
And that's why you get bigger tanks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is that in the cards? Like a potential upgrade from the water box to something bigger?
I have pondered with it. I actually have a Reefer 900, I believe, a Red Sea Reefer, that I believe that is a 260 60. It's not crazy much bigger, but I toyed around with doing that, but I think we'll definitely have to do a bigger display in the future.
Well, the way you're growing corals there, Joe, I think that might be a realistic outcome at some point down the road, right?
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think so. I got to cope with it, but yeah, I think so.
All right, so let's get into the equipment. There are a couple more pictures of coral that I'm going to come back to because they had my jaw hitting the floor there. So we got to definitely talk about those corals. But I see some questions about lighting. Talk to us about lighting. I mentioned the reef breeders.
Yeah, so I've actually run reef breeders from the start. A lot of my method is if it's not broke, don't fix it.
So why did you start with reef breeders?
It actually was recommended by Will, Will Garnett at Palmetto Reef. Early on in my career, he had some used ones. He's like, "This is what I've been using. Just give them a try. They do the job," and I haven't looked back since that day. It's just life's funny. It has a way of working.
Yeah. So all right, one question here is par levels. What kind of par are you getting out of those reef breeders? What do you like in terms of that range?
I actually meant to test it for you guys, and funny enough, I've never in my 8-year career I've used a par meter 2 times, and the only time I did that I was just curious what I was running up top. In my opinion, your corals will always tell you if the par is too much or it's not enough. So I've always let them do the speaking for me. So I couldn't tell you. I'll get back to you. It's on the list. I want to test to just see where we're at. I do know 3 years ago when I did test it, it was like 700 up top.
Ooh.
But I have turned them down a little bit because it's an ever-changing dynamic environment. So I've turned them down a little bit. So I don't think I'm quite. I think if I had to guess, I'd say 500.
500 at the top. And what do you think down near the bottom?
Near the bottom, honestly,
200, yeah. That's still pretty good, man. That's a good range.
Yeah.
What about spectrum? What kind of spectrum do you like?
So I think, in my opinion, where a lot of reefers go wrong is somewhere down the line, somebody said Jason Fox only runs blue spectrum, and then that was it. That's what everybody went by. You got to have some white light in there. You got to have some white in there. It especially, LPS, you can get away with all blues and they'll do just fine. SPS, if you don't have that white light spectrum, they don't grow. They're not as happy, in my opinion. That's what I've found to be the case. So we do a 12-hour cycle on all our tanks. We like to ramp up, just like the natural morning. We start it very low. About an hour in, we'll cut on the whites very lightly. So it runs 10 to 10 a.m., 10 p.m.
Yep.
About noon, I'm ramping up the whites pretty good to hit peak. So from noon to 4 to 5, I'm hitting whites pretty good. So noon to 4, peaking them out, hitting them intense, really nice. And then 5 o'clock, I'm coming back down all blues until 10.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
If somebody wanted to get your schedule, they could just reach out to you to get that.
And that's one thing I wanted to touch on, because as many systems as we have, none of them are on the same schedule. Because every single system is different.
Wow.
And it also, another factor that a lot of people don't consider is how far the lights are off of your water, how far the corals are. Because this specific tank, you can see my SPS are right there.
Yeah.
I rock way up there. So the lights are 8 inches. That's ideal for me. 8 inches off the water. That's not always plausible. You can't always do that. So you have to take that into consideration. And that's why I believe every single system is different. You really have to just tune in your lights to your own system.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, just when you're turning your lights, don't do anything quick. Don't go from not doing any white to now I'm doing 20% white in a day. Very slow increments. I would say if you're not doing any white, I would start ramping up to 5%, like weekly, something like that.
Brizine's Reef, not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, is one white better than the other, warm versus cool? I'm not exactly sure what they're asking there, but I guess in terms of the spectrum, you know, the warm versus the cool part of that spectrum, I guess the best thing to do is to try to like get a copy of your schedules. But like you said, you've got different schedules for different tanks. That's interesting because usually, you know, it sounds like you know, a lot of people that I don't know. I mean, it seems like if you've got a good light schedule that is doing well in one tank, that you would copy it and just use that for another tank. But I understand it definitely makes sense to adjust it.
I never believed in that, and I've always found it crazy when they're like, well, this is the AB plus schedule, and everybody's like, I'm using the AB plus. I'm like, every single tank is different. Every single tank. And I think a big factor obviously is nutrients, on how much par you can give it. If you have no nutrients in your tank and you're trying to do AB plus, I mean, that might fry your corals, you know what I mean? So I absolutely think it's tank dependent on
And how do you break down that? I mean, how do you determine that?
So in my opinion, you start the tank low, because you start too high, you fried your corals, it's over. You bleached them, they're gonna die. You start low because corals can take low light all day, every day, on the day. You know what I mean? So start it low, slowly work up your lights until you see the point where your corals are looking great, and you don't need to ramp them up anymore. But it has to be very slow increments. Like nothing good happens fast on these reefs. Nothing.
So what would be your definition in terms of like taking it each increment? Would you say go a couple of weeks and see, you know, how the schedule is looking like, and if the corals are responding well, then make some tweaks and then wait another couple of weeks? Is that kind of like what you're talking about doing?
Yes. I would absolutely, because obviously it's not going to be overnight and this is going to happen. So I'd absolutely give it a week or two, at least a week. See the changes, see what's going on, and go from there. And your corals will tell you if they're happy or not.
Random question: any future plans to open up a store? That's Ivan Ortiz.
Maybe. It's just in today's world, it's a lot of overhead for no reason, in my opinion. That's where I'm at currently.
Yeah, I hear you. It can get a little pricey in terms of the you know, the rent, right? You know, you don't have to pay rent when you're doing it out of your house.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe you are paying rent. I don't know, whatever. But you don't have to pay an extra, you know, set of rent.
The mortgage is
there. You go.
It's renting up.
There you go. Frugal reefer. All right, so you mentioned nutrients there, Joe. Where does Joseph keep his parameters at? Nitrates, phosphates, etc.
Absolutely. So all of our tanks, we try to target 9 alkalinity. That's just, we don't like it too close to the low zone, too close to the high zone. Right in the middle is good for us. 420 calcium, 1400 magnesium, but more importantly, I think that a lot of people don't take phosphate as serious as they should. I think as far as parameters go, phosphate, alkalinity are very close to how important they are, in my opinion. So our phosphate, for a long time, we just like to keep it 0.1 range. And we started experimenting. We dropped it a little bit just to see. We don't want to drop it too much because we were seeing good results. Lately, we've been keeping it 0.05 to 0.08 range, and that keeps some of that bad algae at bay and all that stuff, with still giving the corals enough nutrients to be happy. So that's where we've been lately. And when it creeps to 0.1, that's when we start to, do an extra water change, whatever we got to do to kind of bring that back down.
How often do you test for phosphate, and what are you using to test?
We're testing every day for every level.
Really?
And, yeah. And here's something else that a lot of people probably don't believe. We hand dose everything everywhere.
You hand dose everything. Wow.
Sexy answer, but that's what we do, man. We hand.
So how do you go away on vacation or something like that?
We've actually trained my mother to. We've got this down to a science, and so knock on wood. That's
specific instructions for anybody that's tank sitting.
They're written down and they're left out. Same instructions, but they're left there, and I call to make sure. Hey, did you?
So you don't have any controllers, things monitoring that you can tell what's going on from a distance?
That's another thing that's probably gonna blow people's mind. I run zero controllers, nothing.
Nothing.
There's nothing.
Bare bones.
Nothing. I do have cameras pointed at everything, so when I'm out of town, I keep an eye on stuff. But as far as parameters go, no. And knock on wood, there shouldn't be any swings since we're hand doing everything. That's kind of how we look at it. But yeah, it's scary. I will say the training my mother was a learning curve. Years and years ago when we first started this, she accidentally put some tap water in my fish food. Put it in there, and the only reason I knew is I came back and I had some really nasty algae. I'm like, sure you didn't do anything different than what I said? And eventually she's like, well, I did use tap water. And I'm like, oh no.
There you go.
Like, you get over it.
It could have been worse, dude.
Oh, it could have been absolutely. I'm very thankful.
So how do you handle controlling nutrients? What are your methods there in terms of removal and additions?
Yeah, we run every single system very simple. KISS method all day. Keep it simple, stupid. Like just absolutely bare bones. We have a skimmer and we have a UV. That is it. And the UV obviously doesn't do anything for nutrients, but the skimmer is all we have, and then we do weekly water changes.
Weekly water changes. And what about so there's no, you've got nothing in terms of dosing bacteria, nothing in terms of phosphate removal, GFO, none of that stuff.
None of that stuff. I believe solely it's you have to put the right bioload. If you get the right bioload in your system, you'll have to do that.
You're not using macroalgae or anything?
I've never in my life run a refugium. I've always been fascinated with them. I thought they were pretty, but they just haven't been in my map. I don't know. I just haven't ever done that, and I've had decent results without it.
Well, so I could tell you right now, man, in terms of looking the density of the corals in that water box behind you, that's what that's doing the heavy lifting in terms of the nutrient removal. In terms of the phosphate and the nitrate removal.
Absolutely. So let's just say if I go one day without feeding this tank, the next day is not going to be good. If I missed a day and we're at point, let's just hypothetically say we're on the low end, the 0.05 where we're at, and if we miss a day, this sucker is going to be like 0.02. So there is no missing another day. You need to get food into the system. You know what I mean? Because of what you just said, those corals suck.
And so when you talk about food, are you talking about coral specific food? Are you talking about fish food? Are you talking about a combination, homemade type of deal?
So we actually don't feed SPS at all. We do feed our LPS tanks because they seem to enjoy that. I've never noticed a difference with the SPS. We let the fish kind of do that for us. The only thing we feed this specific tank is LRS, frozen food.
Frozen food. So what happened, when you started up a system, right? If you're not using any like macroalgae or GFO or any other type of nutrient control besides water changes in a skimmer, when you did you ever run into problematic algae, cyano, stuff like that?
So before this system got started, I actually cooked the rock in a vat for 8 months prior to this, to even launching this tank. Then when I set this tank up, I did not turn the lights on for 2 months. Just did not have any light running. I put a tang in. I mean, no, I'm sorry, clownfish. I put 2 clownfish in there to kind of get everything going in there, because they very hardy. They don't, they can do anything light. They don't care. So one thing I will say is very, very difficult to do any tank off of dry rock, which seems to 100% dry rock, which seems to be the trend these days. I don't agree with that. We did probably 90% dry rock because I was actually unfamiliar prior to this tank, and 10% some existing live rock from another tank. If I did it again, I'd do more live rock. The more live rock, the better, obviously, more life. It took a long time to get this thing established and ready for me to put some SPS in it. I'll say that.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, because it doesn't look like there's are there a lot of fish in there? I don't see a lot swimming by.
So I've got 2 purple tangs, a yellow tang, a naso tang, and 2 clownfish. So
you got a lot of,
but mostly workers.
You got a lot of utilitarian fish there that have their jobs, right? And that's impressive, man, because you've obviously got the right balance going on there, so you don't have any, it seems like you don't have any ongoing algae issues or nutrient problems. And do you ever dose nitrates or phosphates versus adding food?
I am pretty against doing anything chemically that's not natural. I honestly like to keep things as natural as possible, unless there is a dire need and there's no choice. I got to do it. But mostly, if it's too low, I'm feeding more. If it's too high, I'm doing water changes until it's where I want it. I will say I have dosed Microvector 7 in the past to bring down phosphate. It does pretty good. I'm pretty sure, who knows what's in that stuff, but it does a pretty good job. And like anything, you've got to be careful. Don't overdo anything, because the lower the better in this hobby.
So Meckley said he doesn't dose Kalkwasser, and he's kind of like,
So that also seems to be the new trend, and I know that's big for Meckley, and I respect that. And I for me, if it's not broke, don't fix it type of deal. I think I was talking to Chris earlier. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my next system. I'm going to maybe pull around with Kalkwasser, because I know doing what I do that there's benefits to higher pH or keeping it in range. Because I have suppressed pH. That's
what's your pH range?
So on a good day during the day it's like 8. And nighttime it drops. So it's not great. That's not a great pH, but it's working. It works. I think I know from having other tanks, and when we open the windows and when it gets above 8, everything seems happier. And I know that to be true, and based off of what I've seen. But we're just trying to keep things as simple as possible. Once you add another element to everything, that's something else that could fail while I'm out of town or wherever.
So I missed this, I think. In terms of calcium alkalinity additions, did you say you're doing a 2-part, or are you doing calcium reactor?
We actually have always stuck with 2-part. Back to it's always what's worked for me. We run ESV.
Yeah.
It's got the traces in both of them. We'll send out monthly ICPs.
Oh, you do ICPs?
We do ICPs. When you're doing it on this level, I think it'd be just no bueno not to be sending ICPs in. You got to know if there's something that's in your water that might be creeping up.
Yeah.
You want to know that. So. Absolutely.
So you're not dosing then. So when you're getting back those ICP tests, you're just kind of using those as a kind of like a marker, or just something to red flag something. You're not adjusting individual trace element dosing. You're not dosing individual trace elements, right?
So when we get the ICPs back, we will individually dose trace elements.
Okay.
Based off of what the readings are. So normally, you know, once you do it enough, you kind of get a pattern. We know the couple things that are depleted in here. It's usually like vanadium, melibedum, things like that. And you know, I know programs like Reef Moonshiner, those do it daily. And I have nothing against that, but I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think you really have to do that to be successful.
What are you using for traces?
I'm actually using Triton traces.
Gotcha. Chris says once you go Kalk, you will never go back to what you were doing. he's pushing that hard. Chris is.
Trust me, it's next system is gonna have some Kalk. We're gonna work this thing.
I let me tell you, man. Chris turned me on to the Kalkwasser thing. I mean, I've been using Kalkwasser for years, but not to the degree that I started to do when Chris turned me on to his method. And you know, I'd been using Kalk stirrers, so I think that had certainly been diluting the Kalkwasser that I've been dosing to my systems, because I use calcium reactors, and that had been suppressing my pH, and the Kalkwasser has certainly helped elevate it. But yeah, it definitely. But dude, I mean, it doesn't look like you need a lot of help in terms of growing corals.
Well, you know, for now, everything changes. But yeah, the way things are going.
Ari's asking, getting back to the lights, questions about what you're using for the reef breeders. Are they the Photon V2s? Is that what you're using?
These are the V2s, yep.
Is that the latest and the greatest version of the reef breeders, or no?
No, sir. They have one out, I believe, called the Meridian now.
Gotcha.
I don't know if it's out. I think it's out now.
Tom202, what are you using for salt?
Red Sea Blue Bucket. So we actually switched to Tropic Marine for years until that whole debacle happened. And after that happened, I don't know, I kind of just lost trust for the company. And once you do that, you know, I hate to even say that on air, but like I couldn't get back to that. It's just too much at risk here. So Red Sea, for the most part, from anybody I've ever known that uses it, is pretty consistent. So.
And what percent? How often and what percent water changes are you doing?
It's weekly water changes, and I would say it's about 15%.
15%? Yeah, that's a good sizable water change.
Yeah, it is. You know, we most of these corals are out of water when it's happening. So.
What was another question? Oh, maintenance routine. What's your typical, besides the water changes, what's your typical maintenance on a weekly basis?
Just literally testing every single day, scraping the sides, and I'm very anal in particular, so every night to every single tank I'm taking a flashlight, checking things out, making sure everything's kosher. If something's not right, the next day I'll have to address it, that type of deal. You know, just honestly, just husbandry to its core, just maintaining.
You know, your methods, Joe, remind me of a guy that I've had on this show many times, Dong Zo. I don't know if you've seen him on my show or not. He uses the reef breeder lights, and he runs very bare bones systems, and he grows the crap out of SPS. So I definitely see some parallels there. Just that keeping it simple type of methodology is something that these days is kind of unique, I think, versus back in the day.
In my humble opinion, I think that a lot of reefers overcomplicate, like I did the word, overcomplicate things. I really do. I think they go way too hard on the equipment side because that's what they see is, you know, in style is going on. But you don't need all that fancy equipment. I think you can do this, you know, fairly cheap, you know, relatively.
Oh, no, for sure. Absolutely. Question about RTN, STN from Sturgis Reef. Have you ever had any issues with RTN and STN?
When I do, I normally know the issue. It's because another coral's touching another coral and it's getting out of hand, so I need to separate them. I did, you know, you haven't been in the hobby long enough if you haven't had a crash or anything. So I've had a moment where I had an entire tank kind of shedding. That was more negligence on my part. It was more in the beginning of my journey, and I wasn't testing nearly enough. I got real complacent. Everything's good. It's good, and it's good until it's not good, and it wasn't good when it was. When it was not good, it wasn't good. So I definitely have. The biggest thing I can say is just really stay on top of your parameters. Really stay on top of things. ICPs are really a good thing. I know they're not applicable to everybody, but as much as you can do them, I would do them. For sure.
Have you ever used, I see a question here from Tom202, any Cipro usage? Have you used any antibiotics to combat any RTN, STN issues, or have you just done big water changes?
I've never used them for SPS. I have used Cipro for LPS. I had some gonies not doing so hot at a certain time, and I had some chalices not doing so hot. So I'd heard Cipro was a good alternative for them, and I used it and had pretty good success. Knock on wood, I've never had to really mess with anything with the SPS side like that.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of reefers will run into, but like you said, a lot of times it's something that you can kind of figure out pretty easily in terms of user error. So I think it's a whole new frontier in terms of coral pathogens and figuring out treatments, and a lot of it's we're winging it, we really are.
Absolutely, I don't think. There are no experts in our field, so I think everything we do is winging it. I mean, just look at humans. How many pathogens come out every year that we have no idea about? We'll never fully. I don't think we'll ever fully get a grasp on it, but hopefully we'll learn more and more as we go about it.
Speaking of pathogens, you're using UV 24/7 or just in certain? Yep. Why UV?
What actually prompted it is early on in the journey, 2 years into this, I was getting some nuisance algae. And I think that actually was coming from the existing 10% live rock. It had spread and to the other dry rock. And it was becoming troublesome. So, I'd heard UVs are pretty solid for that. And I started running one, and it really made a world of difference, and I haven't looked back. I've actually started implementing them on all the systems now when I get a chance.
Yeah, I run UV as well too. I think that obviously it's not going to kill every pathogen in your tank in terms of fish pathogens and coral pathogens and all that stuff.
I think that's a common misconception. I think majority of your stuff's on the rocks and substrate and everything. The free floating, I think, is enough to where it can get zapped and be okay.
Barry Goss Sr. makes a statement that I totally agree with. Want to get your opinion on it. A lot of new reefers get on a chemical bandwagon and never get their tank chemistry stable, turns it into a roller coaster ride for the inhabitants. Have you ever gotten into the whole, treating tank with, ChemiClean to get rid of cyano and stuff like that? Or are you just true, roll up your sleeves, hard work, and stick to the basics to try to combat stuff like that?
To be honest, it's more of just I want to get to the bottom of it and really just do as much as I can without having to chemically do it. I've always been like that because in my head it makes sense to not manipulate these systems in any way that you don't have to like that. So that's.
Yeah, I always say to people that ask that kind of question or bring it up, and my point is that you got to know what the root cause is of the problem. If you don't know what is causing the issue and you nuke the tank with ChemiClean or something like that, And yeah, you're gonna get rid of the cyano for a while, but it will eventually come back.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, I agree. You really just need to get majority of the time. You know, there's always flukes, but majority of the time, it's something to do with your chemistry. Majority of the time, in my opinion. So you just need to do some testing, and you need to figure out what's going on.
Well, I find it interesting, man. You're doing daily testing. What test kits do you use?
So we actually use HANA. We have duplicates of everything just to test behind those because you can't trust anything. I don't trust anything. That's why we don't have any controllers or anything. The only one that's not HANA is calcium. We use Red Sea.
Yeah. Why is that?
I've heard that it wasn't as accurate, and when I had it for ourselves, it didn't match up with what I thought it should be. So I kind of ex-nayed that one. I did some research, and people were getting the same results. They said it was a little high or low.
Is the stuff that you're testing with the HANA kits lining up pretty close to your ICP test results?
They are, honestly.
Really?
They are.
Yeah. Well, that's a good marker.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. A couple of random questions. Frugal Reefer, any experience with bubble algae? I just manage it, but can't seem to get rid of it 100%.
So if it's an option and you have a bigger tank, NASO tangs destroy bubble algae. But I do not recommend putting a NASO tang in a smaller tank because it's a little cruel because they need some room to swim around for sure. Other than that, honestly, I've messed with emerald crabs. If we get them in our other smaller systems that we don't have a NASO in, I kind of will let it just do its thing. I'll kind of manage it manually if I can pick it out and do what I can with it. Normally, it doesn't affect anything too bad, and majority of people have it, in my opinion. So as long as you just kind of keep it at bay.
Yep. A sort of related question, Big ES, Keith Joseph, what are your guys' best utilitarian fish in your tanks?
Tangs by far.
Yeah, I agree, and you got to just it's a bit of a the pecking order in terms of when you're adding the tangs. You got to be careful.
Absolutely. So I've got 2 purple tangs in here, and that's not common to really have 2 purples in a system this size because purples normally are super aggressive, and these are no exception. They're very aggressive, but it's all in how you add them. If you can, I would add everybody at the same time. That's the best option. Obviously, that's not always a viable option.
Yeah.
What I have found, because I did have to. We had another NASO in here, and something happened, so we did have to replace her 6 months ago, and I was very scared for that. I was very scared because tangs are very unforgiving.
Yeah.
Once somebody's in their territory, that's it. So what I did is I turned the system off. I didn't want to do it, but I turned the lights off for 2 days, put a mirror on the side of the tank, and introduced. When I did introduce that tang, I did it at nighttime. So the lights were already off. And then for 2 days, I kept them off with a mirror there. And it seemed to do the trick.
You turned the lights off in that SPS dominant tank. That must have scared the crap out of you, dude.
When you do something like that, you better test every 12 hours, not daily. Reading on that. It was one of the situations where I needed her for nutrients, and I just needed that to work out. So
Sturgis Reef, tangs and rabbitfish for sure. I agree with that. I've got fox faces in every one of my frag tanks, and not in my display tanks, but every one of my frag tanks. They're great utilitarian fish.
That's one fish I've always been scared of is fox faces.
Because of the
spikes, and I've heard.
I know, man. So frag tanks. You got your hands in those frag tanks a lot, and I have my hands in my frag tanks a lot, and I got all those fox faces in there. And knock on wood, it hasn't happened to me yet. But it's I got one that's like we've got kind of like a good yin and yang going. where I get my hand in there, and he knows that I'm in there and stuff, and he stays away from me. But there's been a couple of close calls. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to react if it happens.
I think that's another thing that we need to stay humble about what's in these tanks, because a lot of stuff we don't know what's in these tanks. You know, it comes as a hitchhiker, bacteria, whatever. Just be careful when dealing with your tank. I try to get in my tanks as little as I can.
Barry Goss Senior talks about my powder blue tanks. My powder blue tang is a ass hat whoops a big hippo tanks. Basically, I think Barry is saying that powder blues are assholes, and I concur.
I had the most beautiful powder blue hybrid that I added to the system 4 years ago, and he didn't have such a good outcome as the Mesa. The two purples just completely manhandled him, like anything, coral fish is hard.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, powder blues are gorgeous, and I had one recently in my Peninsula tank, and it was the last tang that I added to that tank, and it was very small powder blue versus all the other tangs in that tank. But then he got a little bigger, and he got a lot bolder, and he turned into the biggest, jerk in that whole tank, and I had to get rid of him. So, broke my heart.
At least is he still alive? Have you kept up with who got him?
Yeah, no, I gave him to Dong, and Dong, he was a model citizen in Dong's 8-foot-long frag tank, and then he turned on all the other people, all the other fish in that tank, and Dong had to get rid of it. So I don't know what to say. If anybody else out there has had good experiences with powder blue tanks, I'd be very interested to hear about that, because I've had 2 bad experiences with them, and I'm not going to do the old, third strike thing. I'm not even going to attempt the third powder blue.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about pest prevention, man. How do you handle that? You said you got 2 quarantine systems. What's your protocol for bringing in new stuff?
So anytime we get anything, we're absolutely not only cutting the base off, we cut a little bit above where the base is, just because all the nasty stuff tends to hang out near the base. Before anything touches any of our quarantines, I immediately, so this is something that me and Meckley were talking about. A lot of people, in my opinion, go wrong when they receive a coral. They temp acclimate it in the bag in their tank, and then they'll drip acclimate it in a bucket. In my humble opinion, the best option is to take, if you're going to dip it, and I do recommend dipping it.
We're talking about Aquapura here.
Sir?
We're talking about Aquapura SPS.
Yeah, coral,
yep.
Honestly, any coral.
Okay.
When you get it, I recommend dipping it. Our stuff's clean, but you just never know these days.
Yeah, you got to dip no matter where you get a coral from.
For the expression, if I got it from my mom, I'd dip.
Even though she'll add fresh water to the dip, right?
She got that goldfish tank, but I'm dipping. So what we'll do is we'll cut as much as we can off. I will physically inspect that coral when we get it in my own water. I remove it out of the waters existing in as fast as I can, because when you're shipping a coral, in my opinion, the water becomes tainted. When it's being stressed out, it's letting out whatever, the pH is dropping, blah, yada, yada. You want to get that coral in fresh water as fast as you can. And your tank water, whatever. So my opinion, I put it in a dipping container, whatever you've got, of your tank water as fast as you can. Then you can go about, or you can already have it, obviously, if you're anticipating a coral coming, you can already have another vat mixed up with your dip. Our dip of choice currently is Polylab, potassium salts type deal. We have experimented. The bottle says 5 minutes. Don't try this at home. This is our own findings. We'll dip for like 10 hours.
10 hours?
And I say that, but it initially goes into the Polylab dip for 2 hours. Then I'll switch it to another container of fresh tank water with Polylab dip. after that, and then one more, a fresh polylife dip until I'm satisfied and I don't think there's anything going on. I'm very, very anal about even what goes in the quarantine.
Yeah. 10 hours. So what are you doing in that dip, man? Are you got a little power head going? Or you got anything else? A little oxygenation happening there? Are you doing anything special?
So all you need is a power head. You don't even need a bubbler or anything like that. If you've got a power head, and you don't even have to leave the power head on the entire time, as long as you're periodically turning it on for an hour, turning it off. Just need a little water flow. Excuse me. And I've actually done it without anything and been just as successful. Corals don't even skip a beat. They don't even know anything happened. So I'm very pleased with that so far.
Yeah, Ari's asking what is his coral loss percent doing it that way.
I haven't had it.
No.
So not right off the bat. I've had some very delicate pieces, specioso, that were already known to be delicate. The pieces I got were wild. They died like a couple weeks in, but I don't think it had anything to do with the dip.
So what happens? All right, so you bring in some wild pieces or maricultured pieces or what have you. You say that you immediately will cut them off from the base, even above the base a little bit.
Yes.
You do the dip, the polyp lab dip. You doing an inspection? Are you using a microscope to check out for eggs and whatnot for the aqua-eating flatworms?
I'm not. I'm using a magnifying glass. Everything. Really. I'll put them in a white container and get a really strong flashlight and really get to looking at everything. Normally, you'll be able to see if something's going on. If something's biting at it, if there's irritation, you'll be able to see that. But I make sure, absolutely, before anything even goes in the quarantine. And so once it hits the first quarantine, that's observation. We make sure nothing funny is going on for months. We do the 2 to 3 months sitting in there. Once we're happy and there's nothing weird going on, it goes to the second. And then from there, it can go on to
So in that first quarantine, are you doing that just that one dip, and then you're doing observation after that one dip, or are you doing multiple dips?
I will say, if I do receive a coral and I see anything wanky, I'll just toss the coral. I don't even risk it.
Really?
So if it's something and it just doesn't feel right and there's a lot of pests, it's not worth it to me. It's just not worth it.
What about in the second quarantine system? Are you doing any dipping in that system? If things are even if things are looking good, are you dipping, or are you not dipping if it's
actually in that second quarantine we're running the name blanks me. What's the dog
Interceptor.
Interceptor.
I was going to ask you about that.
Before they make it out of there, just to cover our bases, and obviously we're still inspecting very hard every day. So we're just covering our bases. We really, once you get something in these systems, good luck getting them out. It's tough. So
I was going to ask you if that ever happens, like what's your what would be your procedure if you got if something got into one of your main systems?
So what we've done. Currently what we're doing, like this tank hasn't had any new coral added to it in 2 years. This will never get any more new coral added to it ever. It's not worth my risk. It's not worth anything. So once the tank's full and I'm happy with it, it never gets any more new coral, just to try to limit, anything.
Yeah, and that's smart.
Absolutely. That's what we try to do. If we've had one of the quarantines bust out in white bugs before. And with white bugs, we had to do a 3 times the normal dose interceptor. And we did that 3 weeks in a row just to be safe. And knock on wood, it did the job.
Yeah. So I see a comment. I got an itch in my ear here. I see a comment from Blue Reef. Dip's not going to kill the eggs. So yeah, I mean, in theory, one dip is not going to kill the eggs for sure, right? And
so that's where visual inspection comes in. Normally, the eggs are not going to be so small you can't see them. If you're really looking, you'll find something. Now that's not 100%. Nothing's 100%. But If you're looking and you're running quarantines, then it shouldn't really matter. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think a series of weekly dips over time will break the life cycle, right? So if you're able to do weekly dips, whatever you're using as a dip, from what we know from the life cycles of aqua-eating flatworm, the eggs specifically, in terms of how long it takes for the worms to hatch out of the eggs. If you do those weekly dips, I can't recall, it might be an 8 or 9 week cycle or something like that, then you could potentially, eliminate any aqua-eating flatworms that way if you miss the eggs.
Yes. I don't even want to say it out loud. Knock on wood, I haven't had to deal with that thus far. So I know. It's
a nasty thing.
I know from fellow reefers and other vendors, that's not something you want to mess with, and that's where the quarantines come into play. If you have to, use the quarantines. Do not jeopardize your main systems. It's not worth it.
Yeah. All right. So let's. One thing we didn't talk about, Joe, and I've seen a couple of comments or questions about this, is flow. Right. What about flow in your tanks?
This particular system has 4 MP40s about midway on each side, so 2 on each side midway, and then I'm running 2 Gyre 350s, about 75% of the way up. And the gyres cover the top really well. You have to keep them clean. I'll say that again.
They're a pain in the ass, dude, to clean, man.
So I got to keep them pretty clean. But they do a heck of a job as far as flow goes and spread. I don't think you can really beat those. Gyres do very well. Do a good job.
So what kind of program do you have the gyres set on?
So it's like a custom deal. I have them ramping up to, I think, 40%. And that's another a good point is flow. Specifically SPS. SPS can take a lot more flow than I think people give them credit for. But it cannot be direct, streamlined flow. It has to be crest, one on, one off. I don't know if you can see it, I had an MP40 fall on this side, and this was a massive orange Monty cap. And the MP40 fell to the bottom one day, and was sitting there blowing on this Monty for one day, and it completely destroyed this Monty because it was too much flow.
That sucks.
Yeah. So since that day, I've changed everything to crest. I mean, I knew that this one should have been, but it's such a mid-range power head. I kind of just had it going all the time, and nobody was affected by it. But now everything is kind of on, off. That's a big thing is they can take a lot of flow, just not direct all the time.
So it sounds like a lot of randomized flow and a lot of strong flow.
Random is the key. Absolutely.
Yep. Ari makes has a good question. Does he have to blow out the big colonies manually too? So I think what Ari's talking about is detritus. Do you ever get in there with a power head to blow out some detritus?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'll just do the old-fashioned turkey baster. So I'll get the turkey baster out, and that's weekly. I'll do that weekly, just because they're so big at this point. They're settling spots, so for sure. I'll also, since everything's done manually, and I know people, I'm gonna get flack for this. Even our top off's manual. So.
Even your what? Top off is?
Top off.
Holy shit, dude! Really?
So we'll let it run low. Just to get those bubbles, just get a little scrubbing action up top sometimes, even all the time.
Nice.
Seems to work well. Seems to work well.
Little micro bubble action there from the low water in the sump. Are you using filter socks for mechanical filtration?
So in the beginning and with the first reef tank, I was all filter socks. When this tank came around, I was about done with filter socks. I'm not as anal as I am in my mind. It did not make sense to wash a filter sock in your washer that also has like your detergent and everything. I don't know. It just never made sense to me. So I was always against it. When this when I got this tank, I looked into the other options, and I saw people were using filter floss and just a media cup. I'm like, throw the floss away every week? That sounds pretty good to me. So we run floss in here.
Gotcha.
Just floss.
Rich Colombo's asking, temp is not controlled? Question mark. Not even a Ranco.
And this is another big one. Zero systems have a heater running. We
Really?
are 100% temp controlled by the ambient air.
Whoa! Wow.
Always starting out in this hobby, everybody said the biggest thing that will fail you is your heater. Period. That's always what I heard. I'm like, man, I got way too much wrapped in this for a $50 heater to take me down. So we kind of keep our main unit on you know, in the winter it's like 68, 70, and then right now it's 72. I mean in the summer we're doing 68, and right now we're doing like 72. And it keeps everybody at a stable like 74, 76. And we do have temp swings daily, but I've never really noticed anything negative off of that.
So what is your temperature range typically?
This big tank, because it's a bigger water volume, it will typically stay 77. So it goes from 76 to 78. Our other smaller frag tanks, they'll range 3 degrees on a bad day, you know. So I really don't have a negative effect.
So even in the hot South Carolina summers, you're not chilling your water.
No, I'm letting the main unit do it for sure.
So you're running the AC in the house? Is that what you're doing?
Running the AC in the house, absolutely. Next investment, we have generators.
I was going to ask that question.
I need a whole home generator. That's the next investment.
Yeah, dude, you got to get a full house backup generator. I got one of those, and I also have a portable generator in case the full house backup generator kicks the bucket.
Redundancy, smart.
Yeah,
smart.
That's you know, I like 2 return pumps in my tanks. You know, have a spare skimmer, right? Have a spare light. Have a spare everything just in case.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember when we were talking, I'd asked about the TDS.
Oh yeah.
I have a big RODI unit, and I installed a new chloramine monster filter. I've already had one on there, but I installed a new one, and it was giving me a reading of like 8 parts per million, and that didn't really make any sense to me because I was like 0 to my knowledge. And so things happen, and this is the hobby in a nutshell. So I did test for like 2 weeks on my inline TDS meter. For some reason or another, life gets to you, and and that's on me. I should have definitely been testing, but I didn't test. And then when I checked it, it was 8 TDS. And I'm freaking out, and I'm like, I cannot use 8 TDS for anything. I can't use that for top off. So I need filters like right now. And I actually had every filter but membranes. So needless to say, I have membranes now. But when I got off the phone with you, I talked to another buddy, and he was like, well, those inline meters are trash. Have you tested with a secondary TDS tester? I'm like, I actually haven't. Let me do that. And zeros across the board. It was the inline tester. So Warriors have multiple testers because you just don't know.
I don't even like turn my meters on anymore. You know, I got SpectraPure RODI units. I don't even turn them on because I just basically swap out all my filters every 3 or 4 months.
That's smart. That's really smart.
Yeah.
That's really.
You know, and in terms of the membranes, though, that's another deal. I guess they say between 2 to 5 years, so that's kind of a big, wide range. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, 6 months, and we're pushing it a year.
Oh yeah,
pushing.
I don't know the last time I changed my membrane. I got to do that.
This is your time. You need to change it.
I know. I'm bad. Chris Carney said, I've never used a chiller here in South Carolina. So, yeah, you know, it's also because you're using LEDs. You know, if you had halides, then that's a whole different story.
Correct. That's one thing that actually helps us in the winter and hurts us in the summer. Excuse me, is the UV. As you know, the UV will heat it up just
yeah.
a couple. It helps us right now, but in the summer we just have to turn that unit down a little more to compensate for the UV.
Ari's asking. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Ari's asking, did his ICP test show silicates or any other contaminants in the RO water when it was at 8 TDS? Did you see anything in the ICP?
So I had just received the chloramine monster filter and just tested it, so I didn't have enough time to send the ICP or anything out. I'm suspecting everything was at 0 and the inline TDS meter was inaccurate. That's what I think. Because I had I bought 2 TDS meters and checked them. They're both 0. So.
Great beer to reef, Paul. I change my dual membranes at least yearly. Yeah, I'm slacking.
Yeah.
That's something I gotta. That's not good. Sturgis Reef membrane should be yearly as best practice. Everything depends on your water source. So yeah, I think I remember consulting with somebody in the technical department over at Spectapure, and it sounded like I had my water source was a pretty darn good water source. It's not I'm not on like town water or anything like that. I got my own water.
Are you well?
Yeah, well water.
Lucky man.
Yeah.
I'm on city.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Champion.
But they. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say Champion Lighting Supply. No one ever changes the batteries on the inline TDS meters. Yeah, that happened to me. I never checked mine, and I went to check it like once after like a couple of years, and I pressed the buttons to turn them on. They didn't turn on, so the batteries died on me.
You know what? That's probably a very viable option because I have not changed those in years. So it definitely could be an option.
All right, man. I'm saving kind of like the best for last here. These coral pictures that I didn't show at the beginning when I was showing the other stuff here. What the hell is this, dude? Is this like some sort of grafted coral? It's the fourth picture you sent me.
That's actually our Icarus grandmother, the original Icarus.
How do you spell that?
ICARUS.
ICARUS. Wow. Is this also the same picture of it?
Flew too close to the sun.
Is that you gave me two? Is that 2 pictures you sent of the same coral?
So the second one that looks very similar is the Icarus mini colony that we have.
Okay.
It's not experiencing any grafting, but the grandmother was sitting right next to an LRO Buzz Lightyear, and I'm pretty sure she picked up some of that green pigment, and she's also exhibiting some darker pigment on the right. So she's got like a whole thing going on. It's
That is crazy. What do you know what kind of coral that is in terms of the scientific the species of that?
So I'd always assumed that it was a granulosa. When I was talking to Chris, he thinks it's a Lorops, which I could definitely see. So it could be a Lorops.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a granule. It doesn't look like a granulosa to me either. But
it's not thick enough, I don't think.
Yeah. That's sick. And then this thing is like a crazy millie. It's got some intense pink corallites with some freaking hairy green polyps.
She's I tell you what, man, she's something else. Polyps out like no other acro we have. She shows out. She absolutely shows out.
What's the name of that one, dude?
That's Chewbacca. CCH Chewbacca.
Chewbacca. Wow, that's gorgeous.
Thank you.
That really is gorgeous. I love that combination. I love millies. Is that something you got a lot of in your collection?
Yes, sir. We have a decent amount, and we're in the stages of aquaculturing some more pretty nice ones. That should, nothing happens fast in this hobby, especially if you're doing it properly. So. Within the year, we might see some releases of some things that are, in my opinion, very, very nice. Very nice. we've actually got some very exciting pieces coming out. One came from Chris. The branch on it is probably about that thick around. It makes the spath look like a little branch. It's honestly the biggest branch I've ever seen on an acro ever, period. I thought it might be Globiceps, which it still could be that species, but it's something along those lines. It's gnarly, and I love different stuff. So we're in the process of aquaculturing that right now, and it seems to be responding very well. I've never seen one aquaculture thus far, so I think that'll be very cool to get some on the scene.
Alyssa M is wondering, Joe, what is your coral acro that is just your zing?
What is it?
Your zing. I think, what's your favorite kind of acro?
Oh, man. That's a tough question. That's tough. Oh, you had to do it, Alyssa. You had to do it. I'm a smoothie guy. I mean, I love all acros, but there's just a soft spot. I would say spats and smoothies. Spats and smoothies. Any smooth skin acro just does it.
Spatulatas, man. Those are not easy SPS to keep.
No, and I've got a couple in the pipeline that I think are going to be gnarly.
Oh yeah,
they're going to do some good for the hobby when they come out. I just slow and steady.
Yeah. And any pieces out there that you've really wanted to add to your collection that you don't have?
So one that's going to be added soon that I've had and I lost. Just it's a tale as old as time. Acrolandia. I've actually had her twice, and both times, everybody has a kryptonite. I don't know what it is. A lot of the times it's starting out with a very good, healthy coral, and I don't think I really ever got that. But again, once it's in your possession, you should be able to bring it back. So I don't know. At this point, it's my kryptonite. I'm gonna get another one.
What's it called? Acrolandia. I've never heard of that. What? Acrolandia?
Oh, you're gonna look it up and be like, all right, well, I want that. Hey, we'll go half.
All right, yeah. Right? What's that cost?
She's up there. I think she's 500 plus.
Oh, really? Yeah, she's a little pricey there, huh?
Yeah, it's a problem I have. I tend to like the pricier things.
Yeah, it's no, it's great, man. There's just so many different corals out there, and it's really cool. So, I mean, speaking of like grafted corals and stuff like that, is that do you have a lot of those in your collection, or?
We've got a couple. We've got the splice, which is I think the pinnacle at this point of grafted is the Reef Raft Canada splice. It's something else, man, in terms of brightness and just coloration spread. It really can't be beat right now. That's absolutely gorgeous. We had funny enough, we've got a massive colony of orange creamsicle, and we had a piece, just one single branch out of this, foot-long colony that was exhibiting some red pigment. So we kind of isolated that. We're trying to see what we can do with that. So I thought that was pretty cool. We've also got another granny that's very similar to our Gilf granny. Granny I'd like to frag. It's this very beautiful purple with a gold inlay on the inside, but this one is purple with grafts of like green running in different areas. It's very nice. So we've got a couple of things that we're trying to work on.
That's cool. Yeah, corals. It's just, I mean, there's just so many different varieties of coral out there, and what have you. Are you obviously, you're a stickhead. I can tell from what we can see with your systems and all that stuff. Any other type of coral that you're thinking about branching out on, and you're starting to branch out on?
So, I'm a sucker for LPS. I do like LPS. It's just it's getting on my radar more and more. And a lot of majority of reefers are LPS, not SPS. SPS is a pretty niche thing. We'd like to branch out more, so we're really trying to expand in that field. We're gathering a pretty good group of gonies and everything. I think is going to be solid. we're aquaculture, so we don't like to release anything that hasn't been aquaculture. So we won't just receive a wild coral, cut it up, and send it to you. I'm really not. I don't like that. I mean, I don't disagree with it. It's a lot of people's models, but that's just not our model. We like to know what we're going to give you is going to thrive for sure. One thing that you were saying grafted wise, I completely forgot about. We have a anemone, a grafted nymph,
Really?
our transfer that we got from a local, Chad, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I think it puts the Nexus nymph to shame because instead of being green and and gold, it's gold and red.
That's so cool.
Gorgeous. It's we're trying to aquaculture those to the point where we're offering them regularly. So that's the goal.
I had no freaking idea that you could get grafted anemones.
So the story goes from where I got it from. He got it from somebody who was breaking down a tank. They had a bunch of rainbow anemones, and then I want to say it was Deadpool anemones on the other side. Well, long and behold, when they were breaking down the tank, a couple of them were a mixture. So he isolated that mixture, and then he reached out to me and was like, "This is pretty gnarly. I don't have any reach. If you want to." If you want to show people what this is and get it to the world, like, absolutely. People need to see this. This is a nice nymph.
Wow. That's really pretty and unbelievable to think about. Well, yeah, I think there's just so many things that you can do with science and in terms of spawning, coral spawning and grafting and fusing.
And that's something I actually... There's not enough time in a day, but if I can get the time, I would love to experiment with grafting and spawning. We actually received a wild coral a few months back, and while we were dipping it, it spawned. That was pretty gnarly. Never experienced anything like that, so that was cool. That kind of lit the fire under me to say, well,
dude, that's what the garage should be used for. The spawning garage.
Spawning lab.
Move the cars out of the garage.
Okay. Oh, there's no cars, just jump.
All right, man, Joe. So I think we're gonna wrap it up. But any final words of advice? Obviously you've talked about keeping it very simple, but in terms of people that kind of want to get to that next level, or if they've been kind of stuck in neutral, what would be some good choice pieces of advice that you would pass along?
So when I was early on in my journey, I would focus on a couple people that I thought were running systems that I thought I would like, and really hone on them, because there's so much advice out there on the World Wide Web. You kind of need to focus on somebody who you appreciate and respect, and just kind of follow that, because if you start reading all these forums, you'll get 100 different answers for one problem. So I think you just need to, hone in on who you respect and kind of follow them and whatever they're doing, for the most part, all of that.
Yeah, good advice. See somebody that's got success and just use them as like a mentor.
Absolutely.
All right, so folks, go ahead.
I was going to say Big R was one of my big inspirations. Lord rest his soul. So he was a big inspiration as far as, he kind of ran the show from the social media side to growing it to everything, and that's kind of what I emulate, something like that.
Well, I'm gonna end the show here, Joe, showing that video again. And so, folks, if you want to check out Joe's online store, go to CarolinaCoralHeads.com, right? And
yes.
And you could also find them under on Instagram and Facebook. Carolina Coral Heads.
Carolina Coral Heads on Instagram and Coral Heads on Facebook.
Coral Heads on Facebook. Joe, man, it was a real pleasure chatting with you tonight, dude. I appreciate you taking the time, and obviously you got the touch, dude. So thanks for sharing your knowledge and your journey with us.
Anytime. I honestly appreciate you having me, my friend. Seriously.
All right, thanks again, man. And I also want to thank the sponsors for the show, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. Appreciate them supporting the show, and all you folks out there for tuning in and watching. Very much appreciate that as well. Big thank you to Paul, who's also the moderator, as well as the president of Boston Reefer Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to the hobby. Finally, I want to let you know that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. My next Rappin With ReefBum live stream will be on Tuesday, January 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My guest will be Raj from Reef Builders as well as MRC. So you can check out the full upcoming schedule of guests on reefbum.com under the YouTube section. Until then, be safe and be well. Later.